Hello and welcome back. So, as promised, I have brought to you a master cylinder. This is a dual channel brake master cylinder from a late model Hyundai. You can see the one channel, two channels, so that means that there is two pistons within this fine brake master. Both of them building hydraulic pressure to feed different circuits on the vehicle itself. We're going to completely disassemble this master cylinder today and look at all the stuff that's inside and around it, and talk a little bit about its operation as we go. So let's start with the simple stuff. We can see that we've got the body. This is where it would mount to the vehicle. This is where your foot actually pushes on the brake pedal. The brake pedal acts as a lever, and it's attached to a push rod that pushes on the back side of the primary piston inside of this brake master. So let's start taking apart in the easiest way we know how. This lid right here comes right off, just a quick tug. We can see the lid. It's fairly flexible rubber. It's got a diaphragm on the inside of it and a vented cap. If we take our handy dandy screwdriver, here it is, we can simply pop the rubber top off of it, and we can see the air vent hole for the diaphragm. There it is. So there's not a whole bunch that we actually want to explore with the lid, so we're just going to put that aside for now. Next up, we get to our reservoir, and we can see it's that kind of opaque plastic that I was talking about in the last video. It has a minimum line and a maximum line. The maximum, of course, is how full we want to fill this thing with a fresh set of brakes on it, so the fluid has room to expand above that maximum line when it gets hot. So that's your maximum cold line. Your minimum line is as little fluid as you would ever want to see, even with the brake friction material fully depleted inside of the vehicle itself. If it falls below that point, you're in for a world of hurt, because you're going to start aerate the brake system itself. Next up on the reservoir, we can see this fancy electrical connector right here. That electrical connector is hooked up to a float switch inside of the brake reservoir. And this switch, when it's activated by not having enough fluid inside of the master reservoir, is going to illuminate your red brake warning light. Now let's talk about warning lights just for a second, and particularly that red brake warning light. The red brake warning light is the same as your parking brake light. That is just to inform you that you have a problem with your base brake system. Anytime that red light comes on, you should try and figure out why it's on. It may be you forgot to take off the park brake, which can do its own damage, or it could be something else. A hydraulic leak where all of your fluids is gone. Something with the electronic brake control module, where it sees there's a problem with one of the channels of your base brakes. It could be any number of things depending on what the manufacturer is hooked up to that red brake warning light. But you should know that you should pay attention to it. An overview of all warning lights on your dash just while we're here. Green, system's good to go. Yellow, proceed with caution, get it serviced as soon as you can. And finally, red is a full stop. Don't go any further, you're going to hurt yourself or the vehicle. There's only one caveat to that. If your engine light is flashing, you are causing damage to the vehicle itself, and you should immediately pull over and shut it off. So those are your warning lights real quickly. Since this is the third take now, don't tell anybody, I've had a chance to take apart a few pieces of this master cylinder. Usually the reservoir is held in by a screw right here. Unfortunately, our screw was non-cooperative, and I had to stop filming, and, well, you can see the result. So we will simply separate the master cylinder from the reservoir. Let's have a look at this reservoir before we get too far into the master cylinder. We can see it has rubber seals to allow fluid to go between the reservoir and the master cylinder. Those seals are, of course, removable, and I would imagine replaceable if we service master cylinders a whole bunch. I'm going to put on my safety glasses now, because I have been shot with fluid a few times already today. If we look inside of the holes that this reservoir sat on, we can see we have our forward port, or our vent port. That is to allow pressure to escape the individual pressure chambers inside of the master cylinder when the brakes heat up. It allows a exchange of fluid so we don't overpressurize and self-apply the brakes. And then that hole in behind, that's our replenishing port. And when we take out the individual pistons, we'll start to see what that looks like. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove our primary piston, this guy right here, that powers this particular vent port and that particular outlet. This is what the brake lines are hooked to, that supplies pressure to actuate the brakes. And again, depending on which manufacturer and what they've determined, this could be a cross split. So this could do one front and one rear brake, or this may do either both fronts or both rears, depending on what the manufacturer's set up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the back of this piston, and there is a snap ring. And snap rings are horrible things because they tend to snap, and that's why we're wearing our safety glasses. So we take out the snap ring with a pair of snap ring pliers. Here's that snap ring. It's nothing too fancy. You squeeze these ends together and it becomes a smaller diameter falling out of the groove that it sits in. So, next up we are going to take our enormously long needle nose pliers and we're going to pull the primary piston out. Here we go. Here's that spring that we saw in the other presentation, in the illustration right there. That is what we're going to act against. And this right here, so we're going to get out our handy dandy pointer, that is the cup seal that I keep talking about. We can see that it can be deformed. If you push on it, like so, you'll see it folds down. So as the piston travels forward, it flares out and pushes pressure forward. As you release the brake and it moves backwards, this falls over. This area back here is full of fluid from the replenishing port. So as the piston moves back, the fluid forces it to collapse and fills that pressure chamber, getting ready for the next apply of the brakes. And this seal right back here, this is just to make sure that this replenishing area doesn't start to leak into either the brake booster or the passenger compartment. So if we grab it like so, we can pull that spring off, pull off the retainer. There's a retainer. And then we are going to pull off that cup seal. And just pop it up. And we can see that it's got a dish on one side and a flat on the other, and it is definitely deformable. So there's your primary piston. The secondary piston is secured with this bolt right here. So let's take that out together, shall we? There we go. Just loosen it off like so. And notice, if you will, that I'm using the box end of a wrench. The box end is for doing some serious work. The open end is for increasing your speed. But since we've got it loose enough, we can just drop that right out and you'll see it starting to leak fluid, which means that we've broken the seal inside of it. So we're going to turn it over and use our magnet to try and rescue that secondary piston. Come on, there you are. Hey, little fella. So, if we look at the secondary piston, here it is, we can see that it has got a spot for that primary spring to sit on top of it. There we are. And if we look at our primary piston, remember how I said in the last video, if we can't build hydraulic pressure to push this forward, we are going to bottom out and push it forward regardless. There is a backwards cup seal right here to allow it to move back and forth, as well as a forward-facing cup seal here in order to build and relieve pressure in the secondary circuit of the master cylinder. And of course, this spring acts against the end of the bore inside of the master. Now, the bore inside the master, if it is nicked in any way, shape, or form, most companies will tell you to replace it. A lot of them are specially coated with a hardened material, and they have an ultra smooth finish. Because of Pascal's law, we don't want to increase the size of that bore because we decrease our brake pressure and our brake performance. So before we go boring this out, it's better to just buy a brand new master cylinder. That's all there is to it. There's not a whole bunch more than this. This is all of the moving parts inside of this master cylinder. Now, I also promised you in our last video that we'd look at the older way of doing things. And again, this is a new part, and no, I'm not going to disassemble it for you. Once I figure out how to get into the box, however, I will open up the box for us. Here we are, and we can have a look at it. This is a single circuit master cylinder, not a dual circuit. Here is where that piston forces fluid out, and this is the integral reservoir. Again, we have a cap on the top, and that cap is of course vented to the atmosphere with a small diaphragm inside of it, so we don't introduce air into the brake fluid. This is a mid-50s Ford master cylinder, and I was going to use it as a parking brake circuit for one of my projects that I have since, well, neatly abandoned. But single circuit master cylinder with an integral reservoir, dual circuit master cylinder with a removable reservoir, new tech, old tech, and that's all you need to know about the inside of a master cylinder. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to shoot me an email. Drop them in the comments below. Hit our discussion board at eCentennial, or come on over to the live chat that we are going to have within eCentennial. If you are a subscriber through eCentennial, you will get that invitation automatically. That's all I have for disassembling a brake master. We will catch you on our next video, where I believe we will be talking more about brake systems. Speak with you soon.